So I post to social media after I, talk to my lawyer, basically like, oh, I'm ready to file and I'm absolutely screwed. Um, I get a phone call about 15 minutes after posting, and it's one of my former clients. And she goes, Brad, I just want to let you know everything's going to be okay. I have a check for $100,000. I will drop it off to you on Monday.
Welcome to the podcast, Brad Thorpe, the CEO, founder, and inventor of Isophit. And although we're not here to talk about that, Dan Brown brought us together, or I know Dan, and he's in with you, obviously. And what's funny is when I first came across the Isophit, I sent that to my coworkers, and I was like, "Hey, if you guys seen this, like, I think that there's a lot of potential here." And we hopped on the phone. Super personable guy, very big personality. I appreciate how real you are, and just kind of hearing about your journey and how everything came to be for you. I thought it was super interesting. So I think you're a good dude. I'm excited to hear kind of the journey of yourself, a little bit about Isophit, coming to 24 patents in the military, in the medical system, in colleges and things like that, but kind of how it all came to be. So thank you for your time today. How you doing? And tell me something good that's going on in your life, and we will get into it.
Oh, Matt, I appreciate what's going on. What's really good is I'm on your show. So that's awesome. So you take a brief phone conversation. Brief, it was an hour and 15 minutes. I talk a lot.
And we could have
And
kept going.
yeah, it's awesome. I'm very fortunate in the sense that with what I do in my day to day, obviously, as you mentioned, I invented Isophit, so that's opened up so many doors. That as a small farm, like I'm a small town farm kid, and so to be able to access some of the people, the institutions, the network that I have blows my mind, to be honest. Like just this week alone, I was introduced to one of the top four hospitals in the United States of America. Two D1 programs reached out, one football, one basketball. And we got the Olympics starting up, and we got a bunch of athletes using Isofit, going for gold. We were one of the sponsor supporters of Team France's men's basketball program. So you guys know who obviously is on that team. And what is it? 33% of the U.S. team, men's basketball, uses Isofit. So it's pretty remarkable what we're able to see. And then we got the America's Cup starting in mid-August. So that's obviously the high-end yacht racing. So we're with Team France for that as well. So the Orient Express racing team, and we've been with them for about a year. And so it's the fruition of all of these great things really kind of coming together. And just to give your audience a little bit about Isofit, just because it really is the catalyst to the change of my life. I invented a fancy wall. That's really what it.
A fancy adjustable wall.
A fancy adjustable wall that happens to restrain all human joint motion at every muscle length, for every muscle position, and for pretty much most health and performance scenarios. So we're very fortunate. We get to work with people in the hospital sector. So we're dealing with guys with what's called an LVAD, so left ventricular assistive device. So they don't actually have a functioning heart. So they have an external pump that helps
Wow.
circulate throughout their structure. So we're covering that side. We work in the stroke and rehab side of things. And as we just sort of discussed, we're in sort of that human performance space. And Isofit, we're in 38 countries, and we have over 650 of the coolest clients you could ever dream of.
Mm.
And Isofit's just me. It really is incredible to think that we've been able to grow it that far, that fast since 2015. And up until now, it's been myself, some extraordinary manufacturers along the way. And, the people who have bought Isofit have basically been our, how would you call it? So
Marketing.
our marketing sector, right? They're
Yeah.
evangelical. Without them and without them believing in what we're doing, we wouldn't have gotten anywhere
Mm.
because we've really spent no money on marketing since 2015,
Yeah.
which has been absolutely fantastic that these organizations reach out to us and that's how we've kind of grown. So it's been a phenomenal journey, and we've helped a ton of people help a ton more people, right? So it's
Yeah.
we help the trainer, we help the technician help more people,
Mhm.
and that's the thing that realistically I'm pretty damn proud of.
Yeah, that's
So
great. Fit is an online programming software that helps you train more athletes in less time with greater individualization. For in person or remote training, Fit does so with a streamlined programming process, decision making trees to help you integrate data into your programming, as well as better communication with all pieces of a high performance model involved to break down silos. Learn more at fit.io, that's fytt.io, and tell them that Matt Tometz sent you. Coaches, this podcast is sponsored by Samson Equipment. They've been providing elite strength training equipment and professional weight room solutions since 1976. If you value quality products, great customer service, and a company with integrity, then make Samson Equipment your go-to. Visit them at samsonequipment.com, that's SAMSON Equipment, and let them know that Matt Tometz sent you. Yeah, so being able to name all those things within 3 minutes, but it can sound overnighty or one contract or things like that, but it's really since 2015, but then it's really since kind of everything else way back when. And I
oh yeah.
guess and I guess that brings us to our first question, kind of the first kind of fork in the road kind of story and journey. And I have a feeling slash I hope I know where this is going to start. So kind of what's the first thing kind of in this process for yourself where if it had been a left instead of a right, kind of this all would have been super different.
Oh man. Well, realistically, I mean, the biggest inflection point of Isofit is when we started. Um, we came up, all right, I came up with the idea in around 2008. So this is going way back. So it took us about 7 years even to get out of the launch gate. But right when we started, basically, how would I describe this without getting sort of emotional? Um, I came up with this idea because I had two of my clients walk in one day and said, "Hey, Brad, there's no wall space at my gym." I was like, "Okay, cool. There's no wall space at your gym. You go to a 70,000 square foot place, and you go to a pretty big place yourself, and then you get to the realization that most places, sport complexes are slightly different, but most gyms have actually no wall space.
Yeah, have to
Um,
maximize the space.
yeah, they push equipment up against it. They got mirrors on the wall, so there really actually is no wall space in most fitness facilities. So I was sitting down later that afternoon and came up with the concept of Isofit, where it's like I was sitting in the bottom of my tub, just sort of thinking, and it jumped out of like had that sort of eureka moment, jumped out totally naked. Ran and I have a home office, so I run to my home office and just standing there completely butt ass naked. I designed the first ever Isofit. So I get some cardboard, I get some paper clips, some glue, and basically constructed my own little Isofit. And I'm like, oh my God, that works. I can actually bring a wall into the middle of a room and look to restrain all movement. And that was kind of sort of the momentary start. And with doing what I was doing at that point in time, with manual foot therapy and my training background, I was fortunate with some of the clients that I was working with. So one of my clients happened to be Canada's or a senior partner in Canada's law firm, one of Canada's biggest law firms. And this gentleman came to me because he actually broke his neck in yoga. Yes, so he's one of those people that actually,
Quite the yoga session.
yeah. Well, he achieved further. He did stretch beyond what he could. So I mean, void of that. So he broke his neck. He was a little bit of a cactusy type prickly guy, so not very great. I'll swear once on your podcast. So he said, I'm like, so his name's Ruben, and so telling the story and show Ruben sort of this concept, and he's like, "You're fucking stupid. Just stop. Don't even go down this path." I'm like, "Yeah, but it's needed. You obviously think I'm smart because you're paying me money to fix you." He's like, "No, just don't." And I go, "You know what? Okay, well, I'm going to go down this road." So he's like, "Well, let me introduce you to our patent lawyer. Just want to give the first hour is free. and then it's $450 per hour after that. And I'm like thinking, okay, well, that's not bad. I got about $25,000 in my bank account at this point in my life, and I'm like, I'm balling. I can do this. If it goes well, and I have no formal education in law, in production, in manufacturing, in marketing, in distribution, in product development at all. So I just think I can create a fancy wall and I can do whatever I want to do. So I get introduced to the patent lawyer. He's like, okay, it's going to be basically between $15,000 and $20,000. So I'm like going, okay, cool. That means I have $5,000 left. I'm not broke. This is amazing. So in this moment in time, my wife and I, she's my girlfriend at the time, fiance. So she's got some health issues where they go, hey, you got some massive fibroids on your uterus. So if you guys are looking to have some kids, at any point in life, well, maybe you should think to do it. And at this point, I'm, 34 years old. She's 29. It's like, okay, well, we were looking at life and going, what we want to do is we want to travel the world. We're making good money. We're enjoying life and we're enjoying each other. And it's like, okay, well, kids, we got time. But when it's put in your face, like, oh, you may actually not have time. These fibroids are quite huge. You may actually lose your uterus if we go to take them out. So, we get into sort of this whole sort of, do we want to have a child? We're engaged. We're looking at life anyways. And so it's like, okay, well, let's have a kid. And so we're introduced to the high risk pregnancy department at our sort of area hospital. And you're going to probably lose a couple children or, fetuses, children, however you want to sort of express it along the way. It might take you up to 18 months to get pregnant, all of these wonderful things. So we're like, oh, damn, cool. And now don't forget, I've just started this patenting process. So the doctor goes, okay, well, go have fun. So it's like, cool. We get pregnant month 1. And we're like, damn, that's not what we were expecting. That's not what we were told. We had 18 months. So we don't have the finances to have a child, go through the patenting process. And I also have my business and she has a business. And so we're going through, so she's now pregnant. So we're in the high risk pregnancy. So at 20-week marker, we were told, so that's usually when they sort of look at the heart and all this sort of wonderful stuff. So we get pulled into the hospital to check this out. They're going through the examination, going into the ultrasound. They sort of look at us and go, hold on, we'll be back in a minute. So the ultrasound tech leaves the room. She comes back about 15 minutes later. So we're kind of going like, what the hell's going on? And we go over, the tech comes back in the room, sorry, she brings a doctor. They go, oh, can you go sit in the waiting room for a second? So we go out, we sit in the waiting room. This lady with this brilliant Irish accent comes out. And my wife's name's Colleen, so an Irish name. This lady says in her Irish accent, oh, can Colleen come into the like follow us, come back into the room? So we stand up because that's Colleen and that's what she said. And we walk into this room and there's 9 doctors sitting around. And honestly, this is one of the most interesting parts of being pregnant. So they start talking about how they've been following us. And they start to tell us that unfortunately our child's heart isn't working and our child is dead. So we're like sitting there going, are you kidding me? And one of the doctors pipes in and they're like, we've been following you since your 20th week. And we go, we're here for our 20th week. So what you're telling us is our kid is dead or not? They're like, your name is Pauline, correct? No, it's Colleen. So we get up.
Oh my gosh.
We get ushered back to the waiting room. And the lady goes, excuse me, is Pauline here? So Pauline, who's a little bit further along in her pregnancy, stands up. And her
Oh man, you're like, uh-oh, Pauline.
so we now know that woman is about to find out that her baby is.
Man.
So yeah, so when you look at things in business, some days you could say they're bad. However, I have memories during this journey that there's nothing in business that will ever be as bad as what that woman experienced that moment.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's pretty awful. So jump forward a little bit. So we're now, that was 20 weeks. So 8 weeks down the road, so another 2 months, my wife's water breaks. So at 28 weeks, my wife's water breaks. And that's not when it's supposed to, obviously, right? So you want usually 40 weeks. And so we're 3 months early. So my wife's water breaks. We get rushed to the hospital. The doctors go, oh, we can slow this pregnancy down. So they inject her. So we get an extra 5 days. So my daughter is born at 28 weeks, 5 days, and she's weighing 2 pounds, 12 ounces. So she's a tiny, tiny thing. And thankfully, nothing was physically wrong with her outside of early, but it was due to my wife's massive fibroids that ballooned up to about 3 footballs worth of fibrous tumors filled with liquid inside her in her uterus. So long story short, to get back to where this is the most pivotal point in our experience. So my daughter is currently in the NICU at our hospital. My patent lawyer calls me up and says, hey, Brad, just want to let you know, we are now done. We're ready to file for your patents. So this has been now about 9 months for the patents, because we started before we got pregnant. And so my lawyer, Armand, goes to me, he's like, I hope you're sitting down. I'm like, why? He's like, well, we've had some overruns and we've done some stuff. So he goes to me, he's like, well, I just want to let you know the final bill is $47,000. So so my wife is basically at one hospital because she had post pregnancy complications or postpartum. My daughter's in the NICU at the other hospital because she got upgraded, so she got to go to a less severe NICU. And so I get sort of told this. So, and this is the most incredible part of the story, and the use of social media and how you're able to, access and network with people. So I post to social media after I, talk to my lawyer, basically like, oh, I'm ready to file and I'm absolutely screwed. I get a phone call about 15 minutes after posting. And it's one of my former clients. And she goes, Brad, I just want to let you know, everything's going to be okay. I have a check for $100,000. I will drop it off to you on Monday. So that is pretty much the most pivotal point in my entire journey. This woman read a post on Facebook, calls me up and says, everything's going to be okay. I hadn't spoke to this woman in over 3 years.
Wow.
She was a former client who was delinquent at best for her sessions. Not a lady that I would have ever in a million years would have, in the moment of struggle, would have I said, let me phone her because she's going to bail me out. And so, like, literally, this journey has been one of giving and helping and just basically putting it all on the line. So this woman, she visits me Monday, hands me a check for $100,000. And then as she's walking away, she goes, oh, what do I get for this? I'm like, well, how about 10%? She goes, good, and continues walking. So that was our negotiation for, shares in company that wasn't formulated until 2013. So this is 2009. She hands me a check for $100,000. We got our legal stuff in order in 2013. So it's absolutely insane. So that was kind of like, the biggest fork in the road was the one that turned me onto the path, because I was dead in the water when I got the sort of my patent bill, because we were also doing design drawings. That was, that was another $30,000 just for the design. And, so there's many different things when you're looking at these journeys that you're like, oh, I'm going to do this, when you have no clue what you're jumping into. And, there's people that will say, hey, you jump out of a plane and, there's all these other risks and you hope you have a parachute or you can do all of these other things. And it's honest to God true. There's so many different things to developing a product, to starting a business, to marketing a business, to growing a business, to working internationally, to everything. And, there's been so many beautiful opportunities, and there's been nightmares. There's actually been more nightmares than there actually has been beautiful opportunities. So yeah, it's just nuts.
Wow.
But we're still strong and we're still growing and we're still, still moving forward, which is the important stuff.
Bananas. Yeah, I think 77,000 is a little different than 20, but
Well, 47.
plus
But yeah,
the drops and stuff.
exactly. Yeah. So I mean, you look at that and you just go, part of the process.
Yeah. Is that lady still in for 10%?
Oh no, she's up to significantly more now.
Nice.
So yeah, she's been just truly my angel. She's a very, very bright.
That's
I don't
crazy.
know her name ever, but she is the most influential person in my life by bar none.
Crazy.
From a support perspective, a friendship perspective. I wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have been able to help any people, like literally anybody, if it wasn't for her.
Yeah.
So, forever indebted.
So absolutely bananas. I feel like we should just mic drop after that, but no, crazy story. So before we kind of move on to the craziest, I guess, could you briefly kind of go through some of the hypertension, and you were like, well, I have a wall everywhere, and then kind of go from there?
Yeah, so with one of the reasons I got sort of involved in exercise was my mom's dad died of a massive heart attack. And then, and then she was 15 years old, so I didn't know my grandfather. So jump forward to I'm now born. My grandmother dies when I'm 7 years old of a massive heart attack. So she was relatively young, so 68 years old. But my mom's lost both parents due to heart attacks. So I grew up in a family of heart health. And I go to school for basically, it's a program called Fitness and Lifestyles Management, but it really is about cardiovascular rehabilitation and cardiac testing. And we discover that I have resting blood pressure of 150 over 100. I'm 19 years old. I'm an athlete. I'm there basically for volleyball in addition to the program. And so why do I have blood pressure issues? This makes no logical sense. To jump forward 14 years, I hear about a study from McMaster University, which is one of our local area universities. And during this whole time, I'm not doing isometrics at all for blood pressure because it was deemed contraindicated, meaning don't do it because it'll spike your blood pressure, increase your likelihood of either a heart attack or stroke. But I'm using it for neuromuscular re-education. I'm using it for pain management. I'm using it for sport performance with my clients, avoiding it like the plague for myself, because that's what I learned in university. That's what I've been told if you look at the textbooks, and so I'm told, or I hear over the radio in 2008, 2007, that isometrics is good for a single pharmaceutical, or as good as a single pharmaceutical agent for lowering blood pressure. And I'm like, what? I studied under some of the world's foremost experts. I went to school for this. Now you're telling me that this is the case? That baffled. So after a 14-year struggle with hypertension, changing my diet, changing exercise strands, and never taking medication, by the way, so I'm not one for that. Not endorsing not doing that. I'm just saying I chose not to do that. So you're on your own path. But for me, I chose not to because I'm 19 years old. I'm not taking medication for the rest of my life because once you get antihypertensives, there's no exit strategy traditionally. You're there for life. Yeah. I'm like, not a chance. So we end up on this. I hear this sort of commercial or this news announcement on the radio. So the next day, I'm like, well, I'm smart enough in the exercise world. I got all these people coming to me because I'm relatively smart in the subject area. So I devised my own 20-minute isometric exercise protocol consisting of literally just pushing into the wall, right? So I can do trunk rotations into the wall. I can do all my sort of, rotator cuff stuff. I can do abs into the wall. Obviously, you can do wall sets or hip abduction, hip extension into wall, hip flexion. So, I mean, a wall is pretty versatile from an exercise perspective, from I need to restrain these movements. So I developed this sort of 20-minute protocol. And 2 weeks later, after a 14-year struggle, my blood pressure was normalized, right? And a lot of people go, that's not possible. Isometrics are bad for you. Well, recent research subsequent to 2023, they had a peer-reviewed study that was released in I believe it was British Journal of Sports Medicine. If not, it was one of those ones that's relatively credible. And what they looked at was a peer-reviewed meta-analysis that had over 16,000 participants in the study. And what they did was they compared aerobic training, resistance training, high-intensity interval training to isometrics. And you compared all of them. And the purpose was for lowering blood pressure in a hypertensive population. That's what they were looking at. So what they found was isometrics was 98.3% effective. Aerobic training was 40.5. Resistance training was 49 point something, right? And these are the mean averages. And HIIT, so high intensity interval training, was 39. It's absolutely garbage, right? So we have an industry out there that is promoting aerobics to improve your cardiovascular system for these people with hypertension. Now, I'm going to be so bold to say, well, that would actually be in a medical model. If I'm recommending something that's only 40% effective versus something that's 98% effective, that's gross negligence, and you should be sued. So when you're looking at individuals with hypertension, if their doctors are out there sort of saying to them, well, you need to do cardio, you need to work on your heart, well, it's not effective. And when you look at the data, it absolutely is not effective. I know that personally because I struggled with it for 14 years. 2 weeks later, my blood pressure was normalized. That's how effective isometrics is. We just started working with this lady in Portugal. So she reduced, like in the first week, she reduced her blood pressure by, I think it's 25 millimeters of mercury on the systolic and 19 millimeters of mercury in the diastolic in 1 week. That's while she was medicated. And she subsequently sort of, onto her own advice, and once again, this is not me encouraging this, she's started to forget about taking her blood pressure medication. She's now dramatically reduced, if not, she's not completely 100% off her medication, but she's now a month in, and she's basically reduced her medication by 75%. So, which is absolutely phenomenal. And we've seen other people along the way sort of reduce their blood pressure medications and all this sort of stuff as well. But when you're looking at how and why, well, never do people talk about venous return, right? We just discount it. We discard it and go, oh yeah, it's a muscle pump. Yeah, you're right. But it's actually responsible for managing 65% of your blood volume. So if it's not working effectively, why should your cardiovascular system work optimally? It shouldn't. So in essence, with what isometrics does, it gets rid of the rep count. Talk about a new person coming into exercise. Well, that new person coming into exercise, if we say 5 kilometers is, not very far. It's if you're looking at somebody joining a run group, that's the first stage of running, usually a 5K. Well, that's 2,500 repetitions per side, right? It's like, hey, Matt, if you did 2,500 push-ups, what's the outcome, right? So a lot of people, when we approach exercise, and I know this is a little bit disjointed, but we start people off wrong. We tell them to move. They're ill-prepared to move. We tell them to do all these things, and what we end up doing is we end up scaring a lot of people away from exercise, because you told that individual who may have had a mass issue, like they're slightly obese, let's call it, and you tell them that they have to do 5 kilometers. You tell them they have to do 2 kilometers. have to tell them to get up and move, versus let's tell them to get up and contract. Learn how to contract muscle first, because if you can contract muscle, you can lower your blood pressure. If you can contract muscle, you can basically optimize your metabolic activity. If you can contract muscle, you can increase bone strength. If you can contract muscle, you can increase tendon stiffness. So there's many steps before we even move, but we say, hey, you need to move more. When you look at isometrics, we need to stop thinking it as a mode of exercise. We actually have to start thinking about it is, how are humans held together? We're held together isometrically with small bursts of movement. That's how we function, right? There's a portion of your nervous system that focuses on holding still and maintaining contraction. We call that traditionally muscle tone, or the postural system, right? And then you have movement. So if you lack the ability to contract isometrically, right, having high upregulation of isometric tension, you can't move very effectively. You can't move very well, right? And this is where it gets really cool with sport performance. We look at sport performance as something that's happening fast on a field. But what you don't understand, so if you're cutting and pivoting, you actually have to zero out your velocity irrespective of the time interval in order to change direction. So it doesn't matter if you decelerated in 0.2 seconds. It doesn't matter if you decelerated in 2 seconds. You still had to zero out that velocity going in that one direction to change direction to move. And whether you, let's say it's football, you're trying to avoid a tackle. Okay, cool. Most, actually, I'm going to say nearly, I'll cover myself a little bit, nearly all non-contact injuries are a response because you failed isometrically. Right? We get caught up in going, oh, but it was in 0.2 seconds. Really? Do you know how muscles work? Well, there's an upregulation of isometric muscle tension before you had a concentric or eccentric contraction. That is on a sort, like basically you're looking at actin, myosin cross bridging. Every cross bridge starts as an isometric. That's how prevalent or how important this is into all human performance, right? We just get caught up in going, oh, we skipped the basics.
No, the craziest story I think we'll get to, even though the fork in the road story was equally just as crazy itself. But kind of, I view the fork in the road as the beginning and now kind of in the middle. So kind of with all the different clients and all the stuff like that, kind of what's the coolest, craziest story, like one you couldn't even make up if you tried?
Check my email one day, and it's just like I look at it, it's like, that's a weird sort of title name. And it came from Master Sergeant such and such from the
Bam,
US Army.
delete.
Yeah, I'm like looking at it going, this is a joke. So I get this email from the US Army, right? And remember, I'm a small town farm kid in Canada, and I get an outreach email from the US Army that came through our, like basically our web portal. And I'm like, this is a joke. This is an absolute joke. So it's like, reach out to a couple buddies of mine that are in the military. And like, does this sound like legit? Because I don't want to obviously phone them, not doing a little bit of sort of, the back, my due diligence and stuff like that. So I check, I phone my buddy in the Army. He's like, yeah, that sounds like that would be from them. They usually don't reach out to people though. So, they're usually sort of promoted, and like businesses have to go through certain channels. And so I'm like, okay, I make the phone call. And so I make the phone call. I ask for this gentleman, and this gentleman responds. It's like, that is him. I'm like, no, seriously. Is this like legitimately the US Army? Because I'm a small town kid from Acton, Ontario. I don't believe this to be true. He's like, sir, this is absolutely true. You are talking to the, this guy. And we are at Fort Bragg, which is the world's headquarters for the US Army. And I'm like, this is not possible. Like, how the US Army is calling me. They're like, yeah, we're really interested in your isometric strength training product. We've heard about it through various channels, and we want to sort of see if this will help with injury prevention and rehabs, and they're out of the physiotherapy department. And so that was pretty cool. So couple months later, so we go back and forth, we arrange a trial, and I usually don't do trials, but this is the US Army. So I think I had a 14-page trial document where, whether they'd move forward or not. And, thankfully they opted to move forward. But as a small town kid, I had the privilege and the honor to go to basically Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I had I'm not going to say a full tour, but I had a tour of their facility, which was absolutely mind-blowing. And it was truly, truly an honor that we were able to sort of do that. And when I showed up, because I took the Isophit down personally, and this is our larger strength trainer. This is going back a ways. And so I show up and I drove it down. So I'm in a van. And, you pull into the gate at Fort Bragg, and I think it was about 45 minutes from the point it said the gate to the parking lot. And it wasn't like you're going 20 miles an hour. It's like you're going like 40. So it's a massive, massive base. So I get there and I get to the security. And I'm from Canada, so I'm not around dudes with guns. And I'm certainly not at the world headquarters for the US Army. And so these guys, and doing their jobs. You have a dude who's nervous, and a van pulls up to the gate of the US Army. So they got their guns, and they're kind of not pointing them directly at me, but they're like, okay, well, we need you to open all the doors. And they're basically doing a massive security check. I don't know how to open the hood. Like it's a rental and it's a van. So I'm like, I don't know how to do it. What do you mean you don't know how to do it? I'm like, well, it's a rental. They're like, well, you need to figure it out. So they're getting a little bit agitated. I'm getting more nervous. So now I'm nervous. I'm acting weird. And they got guns kind of now more pointed in my general direction. So long story short, it was pretty phenomenal. So that, to me, that is one of those highlight moments. And I'm, as I said, I'm very, very fortunate in some of the things that I get to do now. But that was one of those things where I've never had guns sort of pointed in my general direction. I mean, they weren't like right on me, but it went for about 5 minutes because they didn't want to open the trunk or the lid. I didn't know how to. It's a rental, and eventually they just got to the point where it's like, wow, this guy is just such an idiot that let me do it because we can't progress beyond this. So eventually I, fill up, get through the security screening, get to go over there. I think it was 2 days hanging out with the US Army, which was pretty phenomenal. So it's, it's pretty cool that in that sense.
Can't pop the hood of a van, but is about to change the prehab and rehab and training of the US Army.
To what level?
What a dichotomy.
As I said, life's pretty awesome.
Very cool. Yeah, definitely cannot make that up if you tried, for sure.
No, that you can't. I looked like an absolute idiot. It was wonderful.
And you made it through. So look at you now.
Exactly.
Good thing you didn't delete that email.
I know. It's yeah. And thankfully I had friends in the military that held my hand and sort of said follow up. But
yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so strange things consistently happen when you're looking at how do you sort of you wake up every day in business or life realistically, and you don't know what's going to happen that day at all. So just put a smile on your face, and just be an opportunistic individual.
Yeah.
Position yourself in order to be able to be successful. Never turn down anything. Like this morning, I had somebody new on Instagram reach out to me. So I always respond to virtually everybody because it's like, I don't know who you are. And everyone's always been kind and nice and helpful to me. So I usually lead with, hey, what brought you to Isophit? How can I help?
Yeah.
Like you followed me. You took the time to be a part of this journey, be it a small, grain on the path, or you could be monstrous. Like we have individuals reach out and it's like, wow, thank you. We had the strength coach for the Cleveland Cavaliers reach out to us 2 years ago, and we ended up in the NBA. Now we're 6 teams because this guy Derek Millender, he introduced me to this guy named Jason Walsh. Now we're in Huldy. So, like all of these things based off of, oh, if you don't take the time to respond, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. No,
So
for sure. Everyone
little
knows
things.
everyone, and anything can happen. So, definitely a good example of that. So that's kind of beginning, middle, and now we'll get to kind of current slash end. Well, it's not really the end; it's kind of just the present, I guess. But what's the biggest kind of full circle moment? One you're most proud of, and this is one of those stories where maybe it took some time to kind of see everything kind of come together. We're like, oh, that's why that happened. Okay, I got it now.
Hmm. So yeah, I would say the most proudest moment, and it starts out in um, heartache, disappointment, all of these wonderful things. So I'm dealing with this gentleman. He's in Europe. He's a former strength coach for one of the NBA teams. Used to work with Kobe Bryant, all of those things. So he had a great network of individuals, and he takes some of our courses, jumps at the opportunity to be involved in Isophit from the beginning, which was absolutely fantastic. And he is living in LA. He's like, I want to be involved in Isophit. I'm like, okay, well, cool. You're smart. You're hungry. You're all of these wonderful things that you want. And it's like, okay, cool. So he moves back to over to Europe. And he's like, hey, I'd love to be your guy in Europe. I want to be able to bring this process to Europe. And I'm like, okay, this is amazing. Look at sort of expansion and stuff like that. So we go through the process. We sign a European distribution agreement. He commits to certain volumes of product sales. Obviously we have to promote, what do you call it, sort of manufacture and sort of get it over to him and all these sort of wonderful things. So unbelievable. So we signed this contract and the 3-year engagements realistically. So what he's committed to is about $3.5 million worth of sales over the next 3 years. So for me, it's like, this is absolutely amazing. I just signed a contract for $3.5 million. So life altered. This is great. Now, on the flip side, well, we still have to sell these units, but at the end of the day, you expect him to do what he signed up for. Turns out that wasn't the case. And so we went from having a contract that was signed for $3.5 million to him not being able to live up to his expectations or his commitments. So we ended up having to terminate the contract. So, and this was about 18 months later, just because his numbers he wasn't hitting, and he wasn't basically, as I said, honoring his side of the agreement. And I'm out in the sense that I'm not out the money, but I was owed the money. So you make sort of commitments based off of agreements that you have in place for production and all that sort of stuff. So it gets sort of heated. It gets to the point where it's like, okay, lawyers need to be involved in all these wonderful things. And so I'm owed $3.5 million. He's over in Europe. I'm in Canada. So what I would have to do is I'd have to sort of file a court case in Canada. I would then have to use that ruling, and it's completely favorable for me in the sense that he signed on, he didn't live up, all these sort of things. So my lawyers were like, well, it's going to take a couple of years to get through this. It's going to be a headache. It's going to cost you a couple $100,000 in legal fees to basically get a ruling in Ontario, which is this province I'm in. Then you're going to have to take that ruling and go to this European country. And they're favorable to their own nationals. So the likelihood that you're going to get any money of this is near zero. But you will have a moral victory of basically winning this case. I'm like, a moral victory? How does that change my life? They're like, well, it
Yeah.
doesn't. So I'm like, well, okay. So I took that sort of $100,000 that would have been sort of put forth to the legal case. And I ended up purchasing a 11-acre oceanfront property just north of Maine instead. So
The victory right there.
you got it. So that is the biggest turnaround in life. So either you can choose to fight or you can choose to do something different. I choose to have a thing that I'm now working towards, as opposed to before, like when I was sort of fighting. And I mean, the gentleman was very interesting. I found this very, very funny, on a very disturbing level. So he had isofiteurope.com. So on departure, he linked isofiteurope.com to some sort of Japanese anime porn site. So if you went to isophiteurope.com, you ended up on a porn site. And I had to fight with all the different, like whatever web agency it was. It took us a month to get it down, and about $10,000
Oh my gosh.
to get this down. So I sent this website to my lawyer, and I get a phone call. You can't be sending me stuff like this at work. I'll get fired. Check out the URL. Check out the URL. It was crazy. And I mean, I have a different sense of humor. So I laughed my ass off. I was pissed, obviously, but I laughed my ass off that somebody would think to do that as a parting gesture. So yeah, so so the most memorable moment of my it literally is that, because I'm in such a better position now, because of it. Obviously, if you had $3.5 million, that could have been, it's a difference. It's not an insignificant sum of money. But at the end of the day, I'm really happy that I ended up purchasing a property, and literally it was $100,000 for 11-acre oceanfront property, with 440 feet or 1,440 feet of actual shoreline. So it's insane. So to be able to sort of go from, oh, I was a little bit pissed for losing out on that, to what an opportunity. That's amazing. And when we were off earlier, and it's like my day is bipolar, from opportunity to headache, every day.
Mm.
You don't know what you're going to get. So at least in the back of my mind, I have this property that eventually one day, when we have time and finances to build and construct, we'll be able to build a house, and then hopefully be able to invite all our Isofit community to come experience and enjoy it, because if it wasn't for them, this wouldn't even be an opportunity. So,
Crazy.
So it literally is full circle. Like, and realistically, how do I help other people help other people? Like that's what I do every day. And it's so gratifying. And for all the headache and horror stories that I've been through, and there's way more than what we've even spoke about or in scratched surface on. It's just been a phenomenal journey. So, and forever grateful and thankful that we wake up every day being able to help people.
Absolutely bananas. And it's
So,
it's interesting in those situations, as I've had something personally, professionally happen in the last 2 months, where it's like, well, am I going through this process, whether it's legal or whether it's whatever, I won't get into details. It's like, is it to actually get it, or is it just to make myself feel better? That
yeah,
moral victory, you know?
yeah, and it really comes back. And in certain instances, you have to do it, right? Like, so because I have patents. If somebody, let's say you copied my design, and you're going to go, well, it's for my own personal use, I still have to defend that.
Mm,
I can't set precedent by not defending. So I would send you a letter saying, hey, Matt, I noticed you posted on social that you're infringing on my intellectual property. I'll give you a choice. You can pay me $15,000 to make my headache go away, and I want to see you destroy that, or we can get involved in legal. And I know you're an individual, and I know you're using it out of your house, and it's a DIY product, a DIY. And it's like, but that still doesn't change the fact that you can't take my intellectual property and just but it's just for me. I'm not monetized. It doesn't matter, but you go, I didn't want to spend the money on the product. It's like, yeah, but it now just costs you 7 times the amount, or you're going to have to get lawyers involved. And like that, I hate. But
mm,
on the flip side, you have to do it, because
yeah.
otherwise Nautilus Corporation or whatever has every right to go in and say, well, you don't defend your product or your patents.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so there's sometimes where it's not about moral victory. It's about,
Yeah.
you have to do it because the law forces you to do such a thing.
Yeah.
But it's, you look at it and go, it's still worth it.
I'm sure that there's a whole nother 17 episodes that we could get into just on business itself, which I think is very, very interesting, but super cool and crazy, emphasis on the crazy part, kind of journeys and stories. And I appreciate your openness and candidness kind of to share that with everyone. So I'll try to wrap this up. Say thank you very much for your time. Roll out the red carpet for you to plug whatever you got to plug. Wait, do you have a product? Do you work for a company? Do you have your own company? I had no idea. But where can people get more of you?
So if you want to sort of go look at Isophits, go to isophit.com. So ISOP as in Peter, H as in Henry, IT. Remember, F stands for failure. PH is a higher level of fitness. Just to help you remember that. Just offended my entire audience. That's okay. Also, our YouTube channel. We have 15 hours of free content, be it isometrics for blood pressure, isometrics for back and neck pain, isometrics for cognitive function, sport development, running, all those different things. Go watch it. Go change your perspective, right? Because there's a reason people keep calling me. And one of the limiting factors for the growth of Isophit is just there's not enough people doing it. So people are like, oh, where do I find people doing Isophit? I was like, well, there's nobody in your area. Realistically, if you think about where Isophit's going to be in the next sort of couple of years, it's kind of like we're at the early stages of the spin bike. If you think about how prevalent the spin bike is in everybody's thought process, right? So that's going back to the early 90s, late 80s, I think, actually, to early 90s when Johnny G. Goldberg invented it. And now it's like one of those main staples of everything. So with Isophit, you have the ability to do group exercise classes, private training, rehab, all the way to sport performance. We got a couple new products coming out next year that deal with sprint mechanics from a testing perspective. So you can actually restrain all angles of a sprint, which is pretty cool. Got a portable unit coming out as well. That was designed in collaboration with some of our guys in the NBA. So for a lightweight portable unit that weighs 8 pounds, which is kind of cool. So we got that coming out next year as well. So yeah, many things. So just watch our space. So go over to isophit.com, join our mailing list, stay up to date. On Instagram, you can follow us. It's just basically at Isophit, and my personal handles at Isophit_Inventor. And then just follow us. I respond to everybody. So reach out if you want to sort of continue the conversation. And as I said, I've had about 15 concussions. So my brain's a little bit scattered today. So I do apologize for the tangential thought process. But it is what it is. You just work with what you got.
Fantastic. So thank you very much again for your time. Look forward to diving in, and hopefully we'll be talking again soon.
Sounds good, Matt. Appreciate your time, buddy.